Bullies pick wrong person to mess with. Young teacher's fearless response will leave you speechless. A story by Heartfelt Tales. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Sarah Chen walked through the empty hallway of Jefferson High School at 7:30 p.m., her footsteps echoing against the polished floors. At 24, she was the youngest teacher on staff, and tonight she was staying late again, grading papers and preparing lessons for her struggling students. What she didn't know was that 3 seniors had been watching her routine for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to corner her alone. If you're enjoying this story of courage and justice, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to comment below with your thoughts. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales for more inspiring stories that touch the heart and soul. Sarah had always been different. Growing up in a rough neighborhood in Oakland, she'd learned early that being small and quiet made you a target. Her father, a former Marine turned martial arts instructor, had insisted she learn self-defense from age 6. The world isn't always kind to people like us, he'd told her, his weathered hands adjusting her stance. But strength isn't about size, Sarah. It's about knowing who you are and never letting anyone make you feel less than you are. Now, 15 years later, those lessons had become second nature. Sarah held a black belt in Krav Maga and had trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu throughout college. But she'd hoped she'd never need those skills in her teaching career. She'd become an educator to inspire young minds, to be the teacher she'd wished she'd had growing up. Jefferson High was her first assignment, and despite its reputation for being challenging, she'd thrown herself into the work with passionate determination. The 3 boys who'd been watching her were notorious troublemakers: Marcus, a hulking 17-year-old who'd been held back twice; Jake, whose wealthy parents had bought his way out of multiple suspensions; and Tyler, whose charm masked a cruel streak that had terrorized younger students for years. They'd been suspended multiple times, but somehow always found their way back into the school system. Sarah had tried to reach them in her English class. She'd stayed after school to offer extra help, created engaging lesson plans, and even brought in books she thought might interest them. But instead of appreciation, her kindness had been met with increasingly inappropriate comments and behavior. They'd started with crude jokes, then escalated to making obscene gestures when she wrote on the board. The administration had done little more than give them warnings. As Sarah unlocked her classroom door that evening, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see the 3 boys approaching, their faces wearing expressions that made her stomach clench with warning. Marcus was cracking his knuckles, Jake had his phone out recording, and Tyler was smirking in a way that made her skin crawl. Well, Miss Chen," Tyler said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "Working late again? You know, we've been talking, and we think you need to learn how to have some fun." Sarah's hand tightened on her keys, her father's voice echoing in her mind, "Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." She kept her voice steady, professional. "Boys, visiting hours are over. You need to head home." But they didn't move. Instead, they spread out, blocking her path to the main hallway. Marcus stepped closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over her petite 5'2" form. "Come on, Miss Chen. We just want to show you a good time. You're always so serious, so uptight." Jake laughed, still recording. "Yeah, we bet you've never even been with a real man. Maybe it's time someone taught you what you're missing." Sarah's heart rate spiked, but her training kicked in. She assessed the situation quickly: 3 attackers, 1 exit blocked, her classroom door unlocked behind her. She could retreat into the classroom, but that would trap her. Better to create an opening and get to the main office where there were security cameras and a panic button. "I'm asking you one more time to leave," she said, her voice now carrying a steel edge that would have warned anyone familiar with combat training. But these boys had mistaken her kindness for weakness for so long that they completely missed the danger signs. Tyler moved first, reaching out to grab her arm. "Come on, teach. Don't be like that. We promise we'll be gentle." That's when Sarah's world shifted into the crystal-clear focus her father had taught her to embrace. Time seemed to slow as Tyler's hand moved toward her. She could see the predatory gleam in his eyes, hear Jake's excited breathing as he captured everything on video, sense Marcus moving to flank her from the right. Sarah didn't think. She reacted. As Tyler's fingers brushed her wrist, she twisted with lightning speed, using his momentum against him. Her right hand shot up, striking his extended arm at the precise angle her father had drilled into her thousands of times. The sickening crack of breaking bone echoed through the hallway as Tyler's wrist snapped. He screamed and fell to his knees, clutching his mangled limb. Jake stopped recording, his mouth falling open in shock. But his surprise lasted only a second before he lunged forward, apparently thinking he could overpower someone so much smaller than himself. Sarah ducked under his clumsy attack and came up behind him, her hands moving with practiced precision. She grabbed his extended arm and twisted, applying leverage with surgical accuracy. Another crack, another scream, and Jake joined Tyler on the floor. Marcus, despite his size advantage, suddenly looked uncertain. He'd never seen anyone move like that, had never imagined their tiny English teacher could be capable of such devastating efficiency. But his pride and the toxic masculinity that had driven him to this moment wouldn't let him back down. "You little bitch," he snarled, charging forward with his fists raised. Sarah waited until he was committed to his attack, then stepped aside at the last possible moment. As he stumbled past her, off balance, she grabbed his massive arm and used his own weight and momentum to send him crashing into the lockers. Before he could recover, she had his arm twisted behind his back in a position that would break his wrist if he struggled. "Move and it breaks," she said calmly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. As if summoned by the commotion, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Mr. Peterson, the night janitor, appeared around the corner, his eyes widening at the scene before him. Two boys writhing on the floor clutching broken wrists, a third pinned against the lockers by the smallest teacher in the school. "Call the police," Sarah said, still maintaining her hold on Marcus. "And call Principal Watson. These three just attempted to sexually assault me." The aftermath was swift and decisive. The security cameras had captured everything, including Jake's own phone recording of the beginning of the incident. The three boys were arrested and charged with attempted sexual assault, conspiracy, and harassment. Their parents' expensive lawyers couldn't argue with video evidence of their son's criminal behavior. But Sarah's real challenge was just beginning. The incident had shaken her more than she'd initially realized. In the days that followed, she found herself jumping at unexpected sounds, staying late only when other staff members were around, and questioning whether she was cut out for teaching after all. The confidence she'd built over months of trying to reach difficult students had been shattered in 30 seconds of violence. Dr. Martinez, the school psychologist, had recommended counseling. "What you experienced was trauma," she'd explained gently. "The fact that you defended yourself successfully doesn't erase the emotional impact of being attacked." Sarah had resisted at first. She'd handled the situation, hadn't she? She'd protected herself, put her attackers in jail, and sent a clear message that she wouldn't be victimized. But as the weeks passed, she realized that healing from trauma wasn't just about physical recovery. Her father visited her apartment one evening, bringing her favorite Chinese takeout and his quiet presence. They sat together on her couch, eating in comfortable silence until he finally spoke. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "Not just for protecting yourself, but for continuing to teach. It would have been easy to quit, to let those boys win by driving you away from something you love." Sarah looked at him, this man who'd shaped her into someone who could stand up to bullies. "I keep thinking about all the other students who don't have someone like you to teach them how to fight back. What happens to them?" "That's exactly why the world needs teachers like you," he replied. "You're not just teaching English, Sarah. You're teaching them that strength comes in many forms, that kindness isn't weakness, and that standing up for yourself and others is always the right choice." The next Monday, Sarah stood in front of her classroom, looking out at the faces of her students. Word had spread quickly through the school about what had happened. Some students looked at her with new respect, others with curiosity, and a few with something that might have been hope. "I want to talk to you about something important," she began, her voice carrying the quiet strength that had always been there but was now undeniably evident. "Last week, I was put in a situation where I had to defend myself. Some of you might have heard different versions of what happened, so I want you to hear the truth from me." She told them about the incident, about the importance of reporting harassment, about the fact that no one had the right to touch or threaten anyone else. But more importantly, she talked about the difference between violence and self-defense, about the responsibility that came with strength, and about the importance of standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. "I never wanted to use the skills my father taught me," she concluded. "But I'm grateful I had them when I needed them. The real strength, though, isn't in being able to break someone's wrist. It's in choosing to come back here, to continue teaching, to keep believing in the possibility that we can all be better than our worst moments." One student, a quiet girl named Emma who'd been dealing with her own bullying situation, raised her hand. "Miss Chen, what if we're not strong enough to fight back like you did?" Sarah smiled, remembering her own fears as a young girl. "Strength isn't about being able to break someone's wrist, Emma. It's about knowing your worth, setting boundaries, and asking for help when you need it. It's about using your voice, reporting problems to adults who can help, and never accepting that you deserve to be treated badly." Over the following months, Sarah noticed changes in her students. They sat up straighter, spoke with more confidence, and began standing up for each other in ways they hadn't before. The incident had become a catalyst for broader conversations about respect, consent, and the importance of creating safe environments for everyone. Sarah also began teaching self-defense classes after school, open to any student who wanted to learn. She partnered with her father to create a program that emphasized de-escalation, awareness, and only using physical techniques as a last resort. The classes became incredibly popular, drawing students from all social groups and grade levels. The 3 boys who'd attacked her were eventually sentenced to juvenile detention and required to attend counseling. Tyler's parents finally admitted that their son had problems they'd been ignoring for years. Marcus was diagnosed with anger management issues and began therapy. Jake's wealthy family could no longer buy their way out of consequences. But perhaps the most important change was in Sarah herself. She'd learned that being kind and being strong weren't mutually exclusive. She could be compassionate toward her students while still maintaining firm boundaries. She could believe in second chances while also protecting herself and others from those who might abuse that trust. 6 months after the incident, Sarah received a letter from Emma, the quiet student who'd asked about strength. She'd stood up to her own bullies and was now mentoring younger students who were facing similar challenges. "You taught me that being strong doesn't mean being hard," Emma wrote. "It means being soft enough to care and strong enough to act." As Sarah read the letter in her classroom, now filled with thank you notes from students and parents, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The scared little girl who'd learned to fight had become a teacher who was helping others discover their own strength. The attack that had threatened to destroy her confidence had instead revealed depths of courage she'd never known she possessed. Her father had been right all those years ago. Strength wasn't about size or even about being able to defend yourself physically. It was about knowing who you were and never letting anyone make you feel less than you were. But more than that, it was about using that strength to lift others up, to create safe spaces where everyone could learn and grow. Sarah had faced her challenge and emerged not just victorious, but transformed. She'd learned that sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't fighting back in the moment of attack, but choosing to keep your heart open to the possibility of making the world a better place, one student at a time. Thank you for watching this story of courage, resilience, and the power of standing up for what's right. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know in the comments what you thought about Sarah's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Heartfelt Tales for more inspiring stories that remind us of the strength we all carry within us. Remember, you are stronger than you know, and your voice matters. Until next time, keep your hearts open and your courage strong, ***.